Hi, this is Devashish Paul, CEO of BluWave-ai. We are just about to start our event. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We will allow a minute or so for attendees to start flowing in, and we'll launch into the exciting lineup of speakers that will bring you perspectives from all over the world on how this pandemic is affecting climate change and the transition to innovation in this whole market. Okay, Mike, would you like to start our event this afternoon?
Yes, my pleasure.
Where you are in the world?
We're just sitting at 40 attendees now, so we'll kick things off now. Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's Global Energy Transition Summit. The emphasis, of course, today is how we're all navigating the pandemic. My name is Mike Tremblay. I'm the president and CEO of Invest Ottawa, which is our region's economic development agency. And I'm very proud to have been collaborating our team with the BluWave-ai team since their inception in 2017. It's an incredible company, a real going concern in our market, and we're very proud to work with them, certainly on today's event as well. Our company is the economic development agency in the region. And we focus on building companies. We also focus on attracting investment into the region. And we do it very strategically with partners like BluWave-ai. Just a quick word about our region. Recently, within the last month, one of the companies that does a regular tech talent review of tech talent hubs across North America, CBRE, listed Ottawa as the highest density tech hub out of 50 that were rated across North America. We've moved up our rating overall from a lower score to position 14 across North America. And we're sitting as the third market in terms of all of the qualities of a tech hub that you'd be looking for. So our region is in good shape. We are both a government town, a tech town, and our third sector is tourism. So we're very focused in this region. So today we bring together a cross-section of global clean energy ecosystem leaders. And the idea today is to really get a good dialogue and discussion going on how everyone is navigating the pandemic. There's a number of key issues we've decided to center on, issues including venture capital investment opportunities and challenges, looking at technical innovation challenges while you're trying to manage globally distributed customer deployments, developing ROI models in these uncertain economic times while you try to attract investment and make strategic investments over the long haul. And also looking at things like policy frameworks to help shape the recovery. So these are all important issues that I feel this afternoon's event is going to tease out and generate a lot of good discussion. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Dev Paul, who's the founder and CEO of BluWave-ai. Dev is an Ironman athlete, military veteran, and just a great community partner here in our region. Dev, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you and just express my deep thanks for the partnership that we have with your company. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike mentioned, I'm the CEO of BluWave-ai. We have a goal of building the world's premier renewable energy AI company for power systems and enable the energy transition by essentially providing an overlay of intelligence over the worldwide energy network with a AI intelligence backbone. And we feel that this industry with distributed renewable energy, distributed generation, distributed consumption of energy, requires eyes all over the world to best utilize the resources that Mother Nature give us. And you know, piece by piece, we intend to assist all the partners in the energy network to transform the world with advanced computing and data-intensive techniques. As an entrepreneur, we have our head down in the weeds, looking at data, looking at sensors, trying to dispatch energy at the right time. And my colleague Mostafa Farrokhabadi will provide you some like really interesting details on what's happened in some of the systems worldwide that we're involved in. But we only have one perspective. And there's a much bigger perspective where it's not just the people on the ground with their sleeves rolled up, but there's a whole ecosystem of partners around us, on top of us, and beside us. So that's why for our Global Energy Transition Summit, and the nice thing about running a summit that is happening during this pandemic is we don't have to do it all in one day. So we're starting today, and the summit will actually continue over multiple months, and we'll talk about that later. So starting off, I will introduce my colleague, Pierre Rivard. He's the chairman of Tugliq Energy Corporation. It's an independent power producer based in Montreal, Canada, with deployments around the world. Pierre has been instrumental in the clean tech industry in Canada, taking companies from zero valuation all the way to going public on NASDAQ with $500 million market cap. He is also a board director of the National Research Council, which enables the early stage innovation amongst entrepreneurs here in Canada to target product delivery both for the Canadian market and North American market, but so that Canada can have its outsized impact on the rest of the world market. So Pierre, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Devashish. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here. So I have a very quick overview of the company, some of the deployments we've done as an example of implementing our mission. And then I will just talk about the COVID elements, how we view the situation now and how it will affect our operations moving forward. So next slide, please. So essentially, we're focusing on diesel microgrids. Our job is to diversify the energy mix for industrial sites and communities which are not linked to the conventional grid, such as gas or electricity. And essentially, we do this by discussing or developing with and not for communities or industrial customers. And we focus on innovation and performance, meaning by that we need to be sustainable, economically speaking, as well as environmentally speaking. Next slide, please. So 3 sites here on the screen. We've done essentially solar lighting in Africa. We've done solar water pumps in Africa, predominantly working through Canadian mines operating in foreign lands and with a mandate to help the local populations, local communities to have better living conditions. On the left is a contract we completed in February 2020 for Ragged Island, which is in the Bahamas, where the island has been completely wiped out in terms of infrastructure by one of the storms. And the solar panels you see there are connected to a battery bank, which will essentially displace 93% of the diesel on the island. In the middle picture on the right-hand side is essentially our the deployment in the Arctic region of Canada at the Glencore Raglan mine. And I'll speak to this in the next slide, please. So at Raglan, we displace 4.2 million liters of diesel per year using 2 3-megawatt wind turbine, and that's essentially equivalent to displacing 6,000 cars off the roads, off the Canadian roads. And our design is essentially Arctic hardened, but also storm hardened, as was the case for the Ragged Island deployment. And essentially, we have a 3-pronged energy storage approach to this deployment. A 3-megawatt lithium-ion battery, 200 kilowatt flywheel, and a hydrogen loop, about 200 kilowatts on the hydrogen fuel cell and electrolyzer. Next slide, please. So our company was awarded the first contract by the Bahamas government to convert this island to renewable sustainability. Again, we had to make a very storm-resistant design, which would make it more climate resilient and climate mitigated. And essentially, we're avoiding there a smaller amount of diesel liters than the Raglan project. But what's interesting there is the high penetration of renewable energy compared to diesel. And this is where we're getting into a realm where artificial intelligence, such as the one that BluWave-ai is advancing, as being increasingly important, as maintaining these high level of penetrations cannot be done without proper control and the usage of the batteries. Next slide, please. So in terms of the COVID impact, today's impact and tomorrow's impact is a 2-slide presentation, essentially one step back and then 2 steps forward in that COVID is essentially a bit of a headwind for most of the companies active in our sector. It can also be a bit of a tailwind, as we will explain next. But in terms of the headwind, essentially we're seeing the depressed oil prices making it a challenge to displace with more expensive renewable energy for most of the customers. There's also competing budgetary pressures within the mining companies as well as within the governments. And the deficits accruals will play against the renewable energy penetration. There's also an increasing what I would call nationalistic procurement, in that many countries are now turning to their own supply chain and essentially not relying as much on external sources as they used to be in the past. And also in terms of the micro obstacles, we could see an employee churn as well as a strained cash flow from operations as revenues have dropped by virtue of reduced operations among the customers. Next slide. So the 2 steps forward mean that we're seeing new catalysts on the horizon, in that there's a ratcheting of cap and trade, for instance, in Quebec and California and other carbon pricing jurisdictions. Essentially, the capital is rotating out of fossil fuels and coming in now to renewable energy, and we think that this economic diversification will play in favor of our sector. And in terms of the strategy for the times, we're looking at creating partnerships perhaps in a more creative way than we've done in the past. And essentially, international development will need to evolve along different lines than perhaps the past if we are to have an export-driven push in clean technology moving forward. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, our presentation. I'll turn the microphone back to our master of ceremony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pierre. The impact that the innovations that companies like Tugliq have a lot of benefit all across the world, in the developed world and the developing world. And in that context, our next presenter, Kwawu Mensan, from the World Bank, will tell us some of the impacts that the World Bank is seeing in terms of deployment of all of these types of technologies now that the pandemic has hit us. Kwawu has a very distinguished career at the World Bank, and without getting into all of his great achievements, today he is leading a $1.2 billion World Bank project for electrification in South Asia, connecting electricity networks through Central Asia from Tajikistan all the way through Afghanistan to Pakistan, to basically provide energy to parts of the world where there isn't a great energy network. It's a huge lift. The World Bank has a massive role in this type of transformation of humanity. They therefore see a lot of the challenges on the ground with their folks on the ground, and how the innovation can be deployed now and in the future. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kwawu. I believe the World Bank has a very unique role compared to us entrepreneurs with our heads down in our data and our kilowatt hours of electricity. So go ahead, Kwawu.
Thank you very much, Dev, for the kind word of introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about the energy transition in the post-COVID era and what we have been seeing so far across our client countries. So for those who don't know what the World Bank does, our energy engagement is guided by SDTC 7, Sustainable Development Goal 7, calls for universal access and access to modern electricity services, cooking services, and heating services across the world. And because of that, we deal with clients that are very small. So we have island countries, but we also deal with big countries like India, where even though they have one of the largest power systems in the world, they are still struggling to meet the demands of their populations. Next, please. So over the course of the last 10 years, we have built a strong portfolio in clean energy because we wanted to support our country to achieve the energy transitions. And as you can see, our portfolio is quite large. It has energy efficiency project as well as renewable energy project. They were mostly solar hydro, but during the recent years, because of the cost of batteries falling down, we have now been supporting countries implementing a combinations of renewable plus battery storage project, which is quite interesting. And this is actually what we are seeing. But one thing that I want to say is not that easy. Next slide, please. So our portfolio is actually spread across the continent. We have several projects in Egypt. We have project in Argentina. We have project in India, as I mentioned before, in Cameroon. And in this project, depending on the structure of the market, we have different structures that are clearly tailored to the country needs. And as I mentioned, in places like Argentina, we have a portfolio trying to unlock a renewable scale up and foster renewable integrations. But in other places like Cameroon, we are actually trying to bring in IPP for large infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. And with that purpose, we have been able to achieve some partnership with the private sector and bringing in as much as 12 billion US dollars as private capital. It has not always been easy, but there are certain transactions that were extremely successful, like the one in Vietnam and so on. And we are trying to push as much as possible the frontier along those lines. But as I said before, it's not something that is very easy. So next slide, please. So COVID has actually been a big hurdle for us, a big challenge for a lot of our countries, because what we have seen in the Western or in the northern part or in the developed countries, they have actually gone into a lockdown situations and they closed down the economies. And in the other countries, in developing countries, they have tried to do the same, but it was not always easy because the situation that was in that country did not necessarily foster or favor the type of lockdown that we have seen. And as a consequence, the utilities have been severely affected. Financially, they were not able to recover their cost, and people now moving into their houses or into their home because of the lockdown has created tremendous financial burden because the people have been consuming electricity, but unfortunately they have not been paying because of various measures. And the other things that we have also noted is that without electricity, the needed digital infrastructure and digital tools could not be implemented. So the remote work that we have been able to do in certain parts of the world was not possible. And as a result, the divide that we have seen has actually widened, and this has impacted the resilience of the economies. And also the other point that I also want to mention that I find is critical is the fact that all the projects that are relying on external expertise or good and so on have been severely because of the restrictions that were imposed on countries. And also, as a consequence, this has delayed the clean energy transitions. And at least this is how we are seeing things. Next, please. So now, going forward, there are several things that people have been thinking about. In addition to supporting critical infrastructure with electricity services and so on, we have also been trying to work with countries to see how we can strengthen the energy sector finance, because the countries or the economies cannot support all this burden that country has been having. And also we have been talking a lot with countries about a fiscal stimulus package that contribute to clean energy and universal access goals. So in a nutshell, that is what I want to say, and I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kwawu, for the informative presentation. I have a really good example of this digitization problem. A very simple thing that people will understand. If the cell phone tower is off the grid and it runs off a diesel generator, if the guy delivering the diesel doesn't show up at the cell phone tower, suddenly the whole population is in the dark, including the critical infrastructure. And this is something that we in the developed world may not think of, because our communications networks are all tied to the grid. So something very simple. Okay, so thank you very much. I'll turn it over to the next speaker, and I'll introduce it maybe in a bit of a funny way. All of us entrepreneurs, we think that venture capitalists magically have this massive pot of money, and they just dole it out to who they like or who they think has the best innovation. And we only see one part of it. Just like us entrepreneurs who have to raise capital for our companies, there's a very complex task for VCs to raise capital from multiple funds from different investors that invest in them to redeploy that money for upside. And Cycle Capital is one of the pioneers in the Canadian clean tech industry. Claude Vachet, who will speak, is its managing partner. They saw a gap in the Canadian VC landscape and have subsequently built the largest clean tech focused venture capital fund to enable this energy transition. Claude is on the board of various companies that him and his partners have invested in, and are having a very positive impact across clean tech sectors on the global energy transition. So Claude, I'll hand it to you so you can talk about Cycle Capital and what you're seeing in the market today because of the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Dev, and thank you for the invitation to be on the panel today. Cycle Capital has, over the years, has become one of the largest clean tech fund in focus in North America. We currently have 5 funds under management. We're headquartered in Montreal with offices in Toronto. We have also a Chinese fund where we have a presence in Qingdao, and we're also present in New York and Seattle. We focus on investing in companies that are at the commercialization stage and just before the growth stage. Since in this section, Cycle has invested $185 million, and we've leveraged along our side with co-investor $1.4 billion to build a green economy. We have a unique focus to IP because IP is really important to build value of the company that we invest in. With the 5 funds we have under management, it's close to $500 million. We currently have a fund 4 that we recently closed, and we've done a couple of deals to date, but we are actively looking for a new investment opportunity. And last year we saw in excess of 700 qualified investment opportunity, and this year has not slowed down. The deal flow is still very good. We're an active contributor to the ecosystem because we will all succeed together. It's important to be with the accelerator that we have put together EcoFuel with a seed fund, and also all the other players. So next slide, please. So it's important to say that one of the magic in our secret recipe is building great syndicates. We have been, when we decide to make an investment in a company, building the syndicate as a lead investor. And we know a lot of venture players and corporate players, and we've been very actively sourcing and building the syndicate. Not afraid to work with the corporate investor. We think that together we bring a great synergy to the company that is invested in, and often it helps to accelerate the pace of the growth of the company by building this partnership. So next slide, please. So yes, post-COVID, it changed our life. There's a new normal. So we all reorganized, and all the team is now working remotely. And even though it's from time to time we go back to the office, as I was mentioning, the deal flow is still very strong. We've been actively seeing deals to date. At June, we had 400 deals reviewed this year, and a lot of things that have changed. We're monitoring the second wave, what's going to happen when the second wave hits. And the thing that we've noticed is that the climate change issue is not going away because we're right in the middle of the pandemic. It's still there, And we're hopeful that the government in the US and in Canada will relaunch the economy with a stimulus package that will promote building infrastructure in the energy sector. We have an election coming up on November 3rd in the US. That is going to be really important to see which way it goes. So the new normal, a lot of sectors that are now hot has a lot to do with food, local sustainable agriculture, and also we see a lot of interest in everything that has to do with IoT sensors for soil, air, water quality, and also improve logistics. Obviously, e-commerce has been booming, and green chemistry as well. So it's really important, and we've been doing deals. So you can continue to approach us. It's a challenge, obviously, because we cannot travel. There's a travel ban in the US, and it's more difficult to travel in Canada as well. But we are continuing to do, and we see a lot of attractive deals out there, and hopefully you'll reach out to us. And the one thing that we like a lot in our sector is decentralized energy, microgrid technology. We think that the infrastructure will need to change, and to meet our climate goal of getting less than 2-degree increase in temperature in the world by 2050. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claude, and to all of you in the audience. Now, don't go reaching out to Claude and fill up his entire calendar, and because I'm trying to get into his calendar too. So just leave me some space. But thank you, Claude, for the update and how the pandemic is providing you both with opportunities and of course all of the challenges around it. Our next speaker, Giancarlo Savini, is from Shell Ventures. I got a LinkedIn message from Giancarlo last night. He's on vacation in California, and the hotel that he's staying at went on fire. So he does not have internet access to the point that he can present today, and he is okay. And so I will just kind of give you an overview of Shell Ventures. I'm not qualified to speak on his behalf. Having said that, Royal Dutch Shell, one of the oldest, or one of the largest companies in the world in terms of revenue, I think in their top 5 in the world in revenue, they saw the opportunity very early to redeploy capital from their traditional industries to the energy transition, and in 1996 started the Shell Ventures Group, and subsequently has accelerated clean tech investments around the world. You can see on this map the breadth of investments they've made in startup companies to complement what Shell has, or just to drive us forward in areas that Shell Ventures sees as transformational in the economy. I'm sure in the list of syndicates that Claude has, some of the companies that he's been involved with, or they've been involved with the cycle, have had Shell in the syndicate. Offline, I'll try to get Giancarlo's presentation. If anyone wants to see that, we'll forward it to you. But we will now transition over to Ziyad Rahme. He's the Vice President at Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. So SDTC is a fund that basically invests at early stage across the clean tech industry for innovation that's going to basically reduce the carbon footprint of humanity. They invest in Canadian companies who are in this area, and it's across all sectors. SDTC has an instrumental role in bridging that gap from the early stage innovation to when venture capital can come in and basically grow companies. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Ziyad, who has a very unique view of what is happening around the industry before COVID, during, and the crystal ball into what comes next because of the breadth of companies in their portfolio. So Ziyad, over to you, and we look forward to hearing you.
Great, thank you, Dev, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. So maybe you could jump 2 slides, and I'll just say a little bit about SDTC, and then I'll try maybe 1 more slide. Thank you. And then I'll try and spend most of my time talking about the COVID impact. So thank you for the intro about SDTC. So yeah, so we are an independent organization, arm's length to the government, but certainly funded by the government of Canada. And again, we invest in Canadian small and medium enterprises that have the potential to deliver significant environmental benefits along not just sort of climate change related greenhouse gas emission reductions, but also clean water, air, and soil. And we invest across all sectors, whether it's mining, oil and gas, agriculture, classical clean energy, et cetera. And I'll say a bit more about that. In our funding, we sort of have 3 streams of funding. We have, smaller amounts of funding that go to our seed funding that go to those who are just starting on their journey and just picking up and, starting to develop their ideas. And then larger amounts of funding that go both to companies that are developing and looking to demonstrate their technologies in the marketplace. And then maybe over the past couple of years, also more emphasis as well on continuing to support those companies that are showing really strong potential and helping to accelerate their scale up and commercialization as they enter the market and really start to have an impact. Next slide, please. And maybe just go down again. Maybe just, 1 more. Thank you. And we're about 50 people. Since the inception of the fund 20 years ago, we've invested probably close to $1.3 billion, dollars in 400 firms. And maybe more importantly, as I segue into the next part of the presentation, sort of our active portfolio right now, we're approving about $150 million, dollars annually of new funding. And we have a portfolio of about 150 companies. And that, as Dev said, has given us a very unique perspective on sort of the impact of COVID. So maybe next slide. And there's sort of a panel that shows all the companies, but maybe go to the next slide and I'll segue now into the impact of COVID. And, maybe prior to COVID, what we were seeing over the last couple of years was a real, I'd say takeoff of the Canadian clean tech industry, multiple scale-up successes with many leading companies across a whole variety of verticals from maybe more classical, what you call clean energy, but lots of other stuff around agriculture, smart cities, even high performance computing, which is a big energy consumer, lots of stuff around circular economy, advanced materials, and lots of stuff emerging as well related to sort of space tech, all which have sustainability angles. And I think, lots of real big momentum that was starting to develop. If you go to my next slide. And of course, then COVID hit, and we weren't quite sure what to expect. We were kind of bracing for the worst in terms of the impact on that really incredible story that was being told of these companies that were really starting to take off. So I guess maybe a few themes. I think first thing that we, as we continue to look at and work with our companies and aggregate information, was that the Canadian clean tech industry was showing incredible resiliency. I think entrepreneurs, sort of getting through that initial, March, April, May period, were very quick, they're innovators. So they innovated a lot of their business models, were able to pivot, adjust, and really set themselves up really nicely for getting through that initial crisis period. But then I would say, now they're entering the next phase, sort of these next 12 to 18 months as they continue that adjustment and start to navigate, these new realities. On the investment side, it's been interesting. There's been, I say, delays, for companies that were raising funds, et cetera. But having said that, still lots of investment activity, really, to pick up on even Claude's theme, I think, in terms of what he said, Cycle's doing. I would echo that, and we're seeing that across a lot of our companies. And just in that March to July period, in aggregate, our companies were still able to raise over $260 million. I would say that, but there's still a series of ongoing risks. So will that access to capital continue to be there as the pandemic continues? I guess we'll see. Probably the biggest risk that we're seeing right now is just the border closures. For Canadian companies, the U.S. border closure is significant, but we could expand that to all borders. And what will companies do? I think they've adjusted to maintaining existing customer bases, but how do they continue to grow their companies and make all those new contacts and continue to grow their businesses? So we're certainly watching that. What will happen to all the fiscal stimulus? Will it slow down or continue? And certainly all the volatility, of course. We have a lot of companies, for example, that are exposed to the price of oil and gas and, currency exchanges. So those are some of the big risks that we're tracking and supporting our companies with, as we sort of continue to support them and help them get through this sort of the next 1 year period as we get and travel to the other side of the pandemic. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ziyad. You guys definitely have a bird's eye view of what's going on across the industry and how we're affected. So at a micro level, and that rolling with that, let's hand it over to Mostafa Farrokhabadi. He's the Senior Director of Technology at BluWave-ai, and he'll share a bit about our company, but more importantly, he'll dive into actually how data and intelligence were used to react to energy utilization on the ground during the first phases of the lockdown. And without any historical background, how these techniques were able to react. So this is feet on the street, boots on the ground, trying to basically react to COVID in real time. So Mostafa, over to you. And
okay, thank you, Dev. Good afternoon, everyone, for those who are in the Eastern time zone. And thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. So I'm gonna go through the outline of my talk quite rapidly. I'm gonna just introduce BluWave-ai, and then I'll move into essentially describing what's been the impact of COVID on electrical systems, and then a little bit of closing remarks on what's happening in the post-COVID world, particular with a focus on energy transition. So BluWave-ai is founded in 2017 on its path to becoming one of the top global clean tech startups and the premier renewable energy company. We have raised $5 million so far between our pre-seed and seed rounds, including $2.4 million from Sustainable Development Technology Canada grant. Our prototype products include a first ever AI-enabled dispatch for the city of Summerside Electric in the province of Prince Edward Island in Canada, and for the city of Mumbai within the context of Indian electricity market. You can refer to our website for more information on our news release section. We have 1 US PTO granted and 5 other non-provisional active applications on the intersection of artificial intelligence and smart grids, and we are present on 3 continents with the long-term software as a service contracts in place. We have received so far multiple international and local awards, including being the finalist for the Startup Energy Transition Award by German Energy Agency. We won the Smart Grid category winner of the World Energy Council in Abu Dhabi in 2019, and we have received the IEEE Ottawa section Clean Tech Company of the Year. Our product architecture and where we sit in terms of in the context of modern smart grids, we have utility scale, large scale power plants or renewable energy farms, solar farms, wind farms, and transmission level battery energy storage systems on one side. There is the distribution system side, which includes customers, consumers of energy, residential, commercial, industrial, local distributed energy resources such as rooftop solar panels, medium voltage level wind farms, so on and so forth, and the newly emerging segment of EV and fleet charging stations. And then these two sections are obviously connected by each other through the high voltage transmission line. So we do have our BluWave-ai Center module, which is where all the computationally intensive part of our solution resides, including our machine learning training sites. And the BluWave-ai Center actually is located in cloud currently in Microsoft Azure. And then we do, the center actually is in real-time communication with our BluWave-ai Edge module, which can physically or logically reside on the customer's premise and interface itself with with the customer's control and monitoring systems. We are also we can also have a connection with the system operators in terms of getting control of the energy trading in the system in between distribution and transmission systems. So the product, as you see, is essentially mounted on top of our distributed IoT platform, which consists of the center module and multiple BluWave-ai Edges modules distributed all over the system. So with that product and architecture, we are providing a holistic end-to-end solution that combines predictive analytics. We have actually developed, implemented products, as I talked before, that is using predictive analytics for applications of smart grids. We are providing IP-protected, data-driven, and adaptive optimizers in the system with the goal of minimizing the supplied costs of energy, emissions, increasing the reliability of the system, so on and so forth. And our distributed IoT platform is actually designed to tackle the distributed challenges of smart grids as the penetration of distributed energy resources increases. The bottom line result is that our data-driven and intelligent products are able actually to bring more revenue to all the players in the system, generators, consumers, system operators, distribution utility operators, all the players. So it's a holistic look at the system players in the system, and we bring more revenue for all of those with the minimum required further investment in capital expenditure, CapEx. I'm going to touch on that point later on how this actually ties itself with the post-COVID impact on electrical systems. So this is just a snapshot back to August 2019, where the Honorable Minister Catherine McKenna announced a $6 million international smart grid construction project. And in terms of so this was basically a brief introduction of BluWave. Now let's have a look into what's been the impact of COVID-19 on the electrical system operation. So what you see on the screen is an actual demand for the city of Mumbai, a sample of 4 consecutive weeks. The black dotted line is the average demand between 2018, 2019, and 2020. You could see that starting the 3rd week, which is essentially in this case is March 2020, the red line starts to diverge from the dashed black line, essentially a profound impact, not only on the level of consumption of electricity, but also on the shape of consumption that makes it essentially challenging for all the operators in the system to plan and control the system. We have worked, our solution have been shown to be quite resilient to these changes. I'm going to talk about that's just a quick example in the next slide, but we also published a white paper on our findings and how our products reacted to these changes in the system, which you can also go and reach out to our website to find the white paper. But just a quick example, on top, you see the normal operation of a forecasting system deployed by BluWave-ai at the city of Mumbai. On the top figure, as you see, the blue color represent our forecast and the orange color represent the actual load. And before the COVID-related shutdowns hit the city, actually the performance was pretty much close. Then what happened is, starting the initial weeks of March, you could see that the orange color, which is the actual load of the system, starts to decrease and diverge from the forecast of the system. But what's interesting is that the forecasting system was essentially able to tune itself. The intelligent forecasting system was able to tune itself and converge its performance quite rapidly to the new paradigm of operation. So this is actually unprecedented changes in the system, which shows the resiliency of intelligent data-driven products to even more severe changes in the system. So what's next? What's happening in the post-COVID world for electrical systems? So there are disrupting trends for smart grids, which I'm going to go through each one by one and describe briefly what's been the impact of COVID and what we expect from. Decarbonization is the first trend. We actually can pretty much transfer our lessons learned in terms of responding to the systemic threat of COVID-19 and transfer those lessons to the systemic threat of climate change and accelerate our decarbonization initiatives all over the world. In terms of digitalization, the virtual tools and techniques that have been reinforced and further developed during COVID-19 can actually accelerate the digitalization trend of smart grid. In terms of decentralization, which is the penetration of renewable distributed energy resources, a short-term deceleration is expected because of declining investment, but no long-term impact is expected to happening on that front line. And in terms of electrification, including electrification of transportation, we expect to have a increase in the trend because of the flow of VC money, private and public capital funds into this area of resilient solutions and resilient infrastructures back from oil and gas and real estate and so on and so forth. The bottom line for the post-COVID world, where the projects are struggling with providing more capex, BluWave-ai ultimate goal is to bring more revenue to the system, to increase the system reliability, to enable the transition to a fully intelligent, decentralized smart grids without a really increased need for investment in the capital expenditure. So that brings an end to my presentation and the area of presentation of the panelists. I guess we can dive into the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mostafa, and all of the presenters. We'll go into the Q&A session, and I think your closing remark, Mostafa, actually leads into one of the first questions and one of the things that Kwawu mentioned. So a couple of things. So Kwawu, this question will be mainly directed towards you, and we'll see if others just want to comment on it before we go to other ones. With the pandemic, various budgets and revenues in decline for various organizations, be they private or government, large investments in large capital-intensive stuff may be somewhat delayed. And Mostafa talked about using data and intelligence-driven techniques to get more out of the capital that's out there. But you also pointed to some of the infrastructure related to digitization, and using those deployed capital more effectively is being affected. Maybe you can comment on that a bit more. And also, there's a question from the audience about how in the developing world, not that the developed world is not dependent on fossil fuel-based energy, but how, what are the challenges now, I guess, with COVID of actually deploying some more of that capital intensive, solar farm or wind farm rollouts where they don't already have it in place?
Thank you very much, Dev. Let me just address the first question regarding the optimizations of the operations of the existing capital. One thing that you have seen across the board is when you have a system that was not self-sufficient in the beginning, it's extremely difficult to do an optimizations because there are several needs that now are completely unbalanced, and because they are unbalanced, it's extremely difficult to optimize what you have left. So one of the things that we have realized, and India tried that experience when they decided to shut down their system or some units and see how the system operation will be able to pick up not only the decrease in load and also ramp up afterwards. And that experience was successful. But the reason why that experience was successful was because there was a massive investment that was made in the transmission grid so that all the regions of India were connected. And the World Bank was part of that experience. At least we financed a lot of these projects. So if you don't have that type of infrastructure, it's extremely difficult for you to optimize what is left. The other point that I want to point out is that in the development of our project, we are also trying to build regional grids that span across countries, and at least at this moment, we have several regions in various continents. And what we have realized is that when you have this large geographical coverage, then you can have a high penetrations of renewable. You have more support from the existing assets that are scattered across countries. And Europe, for instance, have actually benefited a lot from the fact that their power system is so integrated that Germany can take the chance to just shut down all their nuclear power plants and then be sure that they will still have the same reliability. And that comes down to the second questions that the audience has asked. What happens if you want to ensure the transition from these fossil fuel dominated system to a renewable based dominated system? And these are the questions that are the core of all these energy transitions. So when you want to do the substitutions, you have to be able to put in place several measures that allow you to ensure the same reliability. So if you don't have that in place, then your whole strategy actually falls apart. So I'll stop there, and if others want to add, that will be really welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Kwawu. That was actually a comprehensive answer. I'm going to go to the next question, but I can totally relate growing up at one point of my life in India and studying under candlelight when the grid was not connected between regions and continuous load shedding, and a whole generation of school kids growing up without light to study in. But now with the national interconnected grid, it's a completely different picture. So thank you to the World Bank for your efforts in doing this throughout the developing world. It's a massive impact, and penetration of huge amount of renewables with the initiatives of Prime Minister Modi and so forth is able to benefit from sun and wind blowing in one part of shining and blowing in one part and delivering to another part. So the next question, kind of relating to this, I'm tying in some of my personal motivations being an entrepreneur studying in candlelight, is going out to investors such as Claude, out to SDTC. And during this pandemic, all of you having to try to figure out which companies, which entrepreneurs to fund, which ones have legs to go and win in the market, borders being closed for entrepreneurs to go and do deals with new customers. What challenges are you seeing in your to close deals or initiate relationships, close deals, and enabling your entrepreneurs to actually keep doing business transnationally and so forth? So maybe Claude, take it first, and then Ziyad after that.
Thank you, Dev. Yes, obviously it's always a challenge to make a decision on which company to invest in. We see a lot of companies. They're not all bad companies. There are some companies that are very good that we are seeing. And they all have a lot of potential, but they need to fit our investment thesis. And that's the important thing. When you approach an investor, make sure that what you're offering is meeting their investment thesis. So at Cycle, we're looking at growth stage companies. So if you're in the early stage of the R&D development, we will definitely send you to SDTC, EcoFuel, or others. And if your company is too capital intensive, we will definitely not be able to make it. We are trying, and as you expressed, Dev, at the beginning, we also have bosses. We have investors who invested in our fund, and they expect a return. And they expect a return within a time horizon that is decent. So that's the biggest challenge in clean tech. make it 7 year. For us, it's 7 years. We are looking at when we put in the first dollar, we have reserve for follow-on investment, and we like to have created enough value to be able to divest 7 years after we put in the first dollar. So it's really important. And so we see a lot of good opportunities, and often it's just because it doesn't fit our investment thesis. And because of the COVID situation, it's been a bit harder to invest, but we have a lot of dry powder and looking for deals. So we are not traveling. So you have our devoted attention to Skype or Teams or Zoom.
Okay, thank you, Claude. Ziyad, would you like to comment on the same question?
Sure. Yeah, great. I mean, I think, you know, for us, maybe a couple of things. We haven't changed. You know, I think two things. You know, I mean, probably the biggest thing. It's always about the people, right? And you know, we haven't changed how we're looking at folks that are coming through. Again, you know, demand for funding, if anything, has gone up. As there's still lots of entrepreneurs and innovators out in Canada that are developing some fantastic stuff, and you know, we're looking for people at the end of the day who you know, who have you know, the ability to take those through and then ultimately take that into market, right? And you know, who are developing along Claude's themes, you know, really good, strong IP that ultimately is going to be scalable. And you know, it takes, you know, the journey for these companies can be anywhere from 3 to even 7 to 8, 9 years. So, you know, yes, there's been a disruption. Yes, for example, the price of oil and, you know, has gone down, et cetera, and it's impacted some companies. But we're taking a much longer term view on the assumption that for the really strong companies, they'll be able to navigate through this. And coming out a year from now, you know, the basic fundamentals of what makes for, and the ingredients for what makes for a great company are still the same. And, you know, and for those who, just like the rest of us, who are trying to work transnationally, they've all adopted, like we are right now, and working virtually and figured out how to make things work. And, you know, probably maybe one of the bigger trends, I think, for companies who can't travel, for them, it's about, you know, how do they start developing local footprints, you know, whether it's distribution networks, for example, to get their products, or local people, boots on the ground, who can help, for example, deploying commission systems, et cetera. And perhaps not saying, well, great, we'll centralize everything in one place and just fly people all over the world. So we're starting to see that shift. I think at the end, it's probably going to benefit those companies, because that's probably where they were going to get to anyways in the long run. So maybe it's just accelerated some of that, right?
Hey, Ziyad, I'm going to go to the next question, but I'll just add a little color on that. For us as a Canadian company with customers overseas, we've had to go to areas where there's where the cost of traditional energy versus renewable energy has a big delta. And that makes the things that we're doing compelling. In Canada, our energy is actually really cheap and really clean in the electricity network. So we actually have challenges with Canadian customers because the economics don't work as well, let's say, as in India or in California or Germany. And so we've had to invest in that pre-pandemic. Interestingly enough, when we go overseas, our customers ask us, well, who in your home market is using your stuff? And then when we go, when we come back in Canada, we talk about how the guys overseas are using our stuff to influence our own home market. So kind of a bit of a catch-22. I'm going to go to the last question, folks. I know we're right at the top of the hour. A few of our panelists will have to drop off. Please keep sending questions in the window. The last question is actually related to you know, the impact on the ground of this in terms of the actual projects. I'll ask Pierre Rivard from Tugliq to talk about that. And then Mostafa already spoke about it in our presentation, so I won't ask Mostafa. But Kwawu, you may actually have a variety of touch points all across the world in terms of, like, you know, getting a technician on the ground to do something, and they can't do it with physical distancing and so forth. So Pierre, maybe if you could take a first quick cut at it, and then I'll hand it to Kwawu, and then we'll kind of wrap up the event. So go ahead.
That's a very good question. Typically, a lot of the mining customers were in lockdown, which was very acute, as they did not want to contaminate their local population and local workers, but also because of the very tight living quarters, it was very restricted. And as a result, we had to essentially have our technicians undergo COVID testing, as well as have all of the standard cleaning procedures that need to be taking place. But by and large, everyone is aware of the situation and is doing their utmost. And we haven't had any declared COVID cases in any one of our customers or within the company. So we've been fortunate in that respect. However, it does take a very conscientious approach to continue doing that. In terms of the flights, it's obviously a very restrictive environment to fly in someone, let's say, to the Bahamas or to the Arctic, as you have essentially the distancing restrictions, which reduce the number of flights, let's say, between a major urban center in Canada from what used to be 12, 15 to maybe 4 or 5 a day. So all of your connections are impacted by that. So we need to be a bit more planning and more logistics intensive in what we're doing. But so far, so good. We've been able to maintain our assets and deliver electrons to the customers without a glitch so far. But it's a challenge indeed.
Kwawu, could you answer on like projects, physical distancing, travel, quarantines affecting like progress on projects on the ground?
In fact, this is one of the major issues that we are dealing with in many of our projects across all the continents. I can give you an example. For instance, in Afghanistan, where we have the project that you just mentioned in the introduction, the contractors, they have been able to go to communities, but the communities stopped them from coming in because they wanted to protect themselves from the spread of COVID, even though they have protective equipment, even though they have all the measures for social distancing and so on. The community did not feel safe to allow these workers to come in. So essentially, this is some of the realities that we are dealing with. And in other parts, we have a stronger regiment, companies implementing regulations, strict regulations for social distancing. But when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to operation of the systems and the movement of technicians and so on, we have shared with companies specific guidelines so that they can prevent the spread of the disease and also protect the workers. So essentially, this is what I can say. And also the closing of borders has had a great impact on the progress of project. As I mentioned in the slides, all the goods that are being shipped and so on, instead of having a traditional lead time of 1 month or so, you end up with 2-3 months without any guarantees that the equipment, you get it when you need it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And you know, on that front, Mostafa and his team here at BluWave have been able to, you know, where we're already integrated and we're set up over the cloud into the customer's network, we were able to quickly react to COVID. And there's a question from the floor about, or from the audience, about how quickly were the AI models able to react. It's hours to days to sub 1 week. And we were able to do that without like physical touch points. And it's very interesting. We got outreach from various private equity funds around the world about, you know, redeployment of capital. And they said, well, we want to invest in companies that have less human touch points in the post-pandemic. And I mean, the world can't exist without human touch points, as you've pointed out. So on that note, I'm going to wrap this this part of the summit up, and I'm going to I spoke about Mostafa's team, and I'd like to introduce our colleague Nasrin Sadeghianpour. She is one of our top AI data scientists, instrumental in many of our deployments, and one of our top inventors in terms of where the world will go from the perspective of electrification and using renewable energy in the transport systems, in electric vehicle fleets, in taxis, in delivery vehicles, and so forth. And recently has filed a patent in this area. She's going to be chairing the next phase of this Global Energy Transition Summit. So unlike a summit that happens in one day, this Global Energy Transition Summit will extend over time, which gives us the flexibility to bring smart speakers in, adjust to the topics that are relevant in the economy, and bring this cross-pollination of ideas. So Nasrin, over to you if you can take the floor and introduce the next step in the Global Energy Transition Summit.
Thank you very much, Deb. It's my pleasure to announce our next event in the series of Global Energy Transition Summit. And given that women's participation and leadership has been influential and is essential in this transition, so we would like to title our next event as Women Innovators Driving Climate Change Mitigation. So in this event, building on top of the panel from this week, in the upcoming event, we will discuss the impact of the technology and economic innovations for fighting the climate change. So specifically, we will touch upon how these complement each other and converge to support our transition to a greener future. So the call for speakers is out, and I would like to invite you all to join us and discuss and hear the key roles the women innovators and entrepreneurs play in this transition. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Nasrin. We will firm up the date in a few weeks. If you have colleagues, those in the audience, as well as the panelists, who can provide a unique view into this next event, we would really appreciate it. And so with that, I'll wrap it up. My contact information, if you can't guess from our website how to contact me, it's just my first name dot last name at BluWave-ai.com. Feel free to outreach to me. Otherwise, through your registration, you'll get the link to the replay of this. If you weren't able to attend or your colleagues weren't able to attend the whole thing, that'll all be, there'll be an outreach communication to all of you. Thanks to our panelists for investing your time to share in this this important topic as we get through this change in how the world operates. Okay, so with that, we'll close it off, and we'll reconvene in October for the continuation of this.
Thank you, and have a great day.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
all.
the best. Thank you.